Buenos días a todos, volvemos a un nuevo programa del Simbionte y hoy es una ocasión súper especial porque tenemos con nosotros a uno de los creadores de la serie de dibujos animados de Batman de los años 90. Con nosotros está Kevin Altieri. Nice to have you here, Kevin.
Ah, glad to be here.
It's a real pleasure for us to have you here. I think we can start for the most obvious thing. You are nobody has directed more Batman episodes than you in the original series. How can you remember those times?
Well, it was a lot of work, but it was kind of, I mean, if you look at like my crew, who I still am friends with, and I still know them, like Dan Reba and Brad Rader, Mark Wallace, Mike Gogan, all those guys, we all came from Deke in the 80s,
Mhm.
doing Alf Tales, Real Ghostbusters, shows like that. And the thing about Warner Brothers, and I also worked at, after that, I was working at Disney Feature,
Mhm.
briefly on Lion King and Treasure Planet and development. But the thing that we always worked towards was like doing like Fleischer's Superman, you know.
Mhm.
We always dreamed of doing Fleischer's Superman, if anyone is familiar with those. And we were also all in love with Japanese animation. And so we worked with Japanese studios.
Mhm.
So Warner Brothers was like the first time that we felt like we could actually, and Batman was like the first time we felt like we could really get it, and do it. So that was the best thing about it. The worst thing about it was how much work you had to do, we had to put in and how hard it was, because it was difficult to get like that really good style down, and it was just a lot of drawing, but a lot of heart,
The
involved.
style is the key because the dark tone
Yeah.
wasn't the usual thing
Oh,
then. Yeah.
yeah, no, we had to convince people.
Mhm.
Like in the layouts, I remember I was getting because we did layout full layout, just like it was a feature at Warner Brothers. Um, and a lot of the layout artists that we had were veterans from places like Filmation and stuff. And I ended up drawing a lot of the layouts, especially with Alfred in the Batcave, because I said, look, don't do the outs. Why are you drawing outlines around Alfred? Well, you won't be able to see him. And it's like, look, yes, he's pure black with cuffs. All we're gonna see is his cuffs and his hands and his head and his white shirt. It's gonna work. Take my word for it. Nah, it'll never work. Anyway, it works. It's like and Batman going through shadows and letting it go absolutely black. That was very different. And it took some convincing to let us do it. But when On Leather Wings came back, there was no questions anymore. Nothing. So
That's a great pilot.
yeah, thank you. No, we worked really hard on that. And Spectrum, the animation studio, was those were animators that we actually worked with at Deke. A lot of them were from TMS.
Mhm.
They worked on things like Nausicaa and like Miyazaki films. Like a lot of them worked on Castle Cagliostro. So it was kind of like, you know, it's like we're all friends and all just, in it together. But the animators, they're fantastic, on that one especially. There was a lot more. I mean, a lot of like actually, I recognized like if you think about Man-Bat flying past the blimp,
Yeah.
I had no right to expect that level of animation. And this guy animated the blimp fully, and I don't even know his name, but he keeps cropping up in my episodes from here or there. Like I see him, it's the same person. I know it's the same person who did like the interior of the in Two-Face Part One, did the interior of the psychiatrist's office, all that great animation on Harvey Dent turning into, Big Bad Harv. Same animator. Same animator at the end of Harley's Holiday when you're in the car with Veronica Vreeland and
Wow.
Harley. and the animation on the girls is so beautiful. It's like it, and it's same guy, same person. I can tell. Anyway,
Many people believe, and it is wrong, that the series was created because of the success of the Tim Burton movies, and there were the totally different process.
yeah. I actually they actually had him come in. You know, they were trying to get him to be like a consultant on the series, and he just said, "No, these guys know what they're doing. Leave me out of it." You know. And the Tim Burton movies, the Tim Burton movies are, they are what they are. They're Tim. His movies are always Tim Burton films. They're not necessarily our kind of Batman. It's like his kind of Batman. But Tim Burton does Tim Burton, no matter what he does. So, and he's an animator too. He's another guy from Disney Feature. And he was like, no, 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 these guys know what they're doing. Just leave them alone and, keep me out of it. Yeah.
But for a lot of us, since we were a child, this series is something canonic because have not the darkness, not the characters, because have a biggest mythology. I right now I looking that you have the Mjolnir in your neck. What about construct all the mythology around this character in your series?
Well, the mythology, that it's like it was really personal, for I think for all of us, for me certainly, because Batman was just someone I grew up with, and the thing, I have a lot of problems with the way that Batman's portrayed now. Like, they're just trying to make him dark for no reason, just dark.
Mm.
But the thing is, Bruce Wayne, is such a noble guy, and what I grew up on and what really hit me was the Neil Adams comics, the Denny O'Neil Neil Adams comics from the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I thought, this is Batman, you
Mm.
know. So, and as a matter of fact, the Ra's al Ghul stories really were my favorite. Like, I just thought Ra's al Ghul was such a good character, and suddenly Batman becomes an international character. He's more of a, suddenly there's like a James Bond kind of thing going on. And when I was 13, I really dreamed. I just thought in my head why this came into my head, because I'm poor. I'm living in Connecticut, in like this very small house, and there's no way I could ever afford to go to art school or anything. I did go
Mm.
to art school, but
Hmm.
but I thought in my head, like, I want to make this into a movie. I want to make this into a cartoon, racial goal. And that's when I was 13. And then I got to do it. I mean, I actually got to do the racial ghoul stories on Batman.
Every
So,
single episode from Russell Gould. Did you ask for it?
oh yeah. No, I insisted on it. I actually, the first interview, after Bruce had shown me that original trailer that they did, and I was just blown away. I thought, oh my God, you guys want Fleischer Brothers and you're actually you're getting it. And I thought, okay, sign me up. I'm on board. I could have asked for more money. I probably should have, but I didn't. I was I was basically getting paid what a storyboard artist at another studio was getting, but that was okay. It was enough. And at the end of the interview, I said, okay, sign me up, Bruce, but when Ra's al Ghul shows up, promise me that I get to do it. And he was like, you got it. And Eric Radomski, same thing. Alan Burnett, when he finally showed up, that was one of the first conversations. And Bruce said, tell Alan what the deal is. And they said, when Ra's al Ghul shows up, I'm doing it. And Alan Burnett's like, okay, you know. And Denny O'Neil, they actually got Denny O'Neil to write
Yes.
an adaptation of his own story.
Mm.
And that was great, you know. And Denny O'Neil was my pal from then on, you know.
Well,
Yeah, I can't even describe it. It's like as a fanboy, how can that happen? Well, it did, you know.
yeah, because you did many adaptations from comic books and original stories. It was
Yeah.
a perfect mix.
Yeah, and that's another thing that I liked about it. At first, the stories were very Saturday morning. The original scripts we had, like The Last Laugh,
Mhm.
um, originally called The Joker, April's Fool, which was a terrible title. You know, so we changed it to The Last Laugh. But that's the kind of thing where we were struggling with the script to make it what, you know, the vision, what you guys are talking about. And the scripts just weren't there. But when Alan Burnett came on board, everything changed. And then we were doing adaptations, you know. Mitch Bryan did On Leather Wings, and he also did the story for POV. But POV got weakened, you know. Again, it got Saturday mornings, you know, like everyone was afraid of the violence, and we couldn't have crooked cops and things like that. All of that changed, you know, later on. But you know,
Mhm.
it's like with the exception of on Leather Wings, which I thought was like this is the way we should go. And it was great that I got a monster so that Batman would have to let loose on him. You know, he'd really have to get physical with him because he's a monster, you know, and you can punch monsters. You can punch robots, you can punch monsters, you know.
And what
But
about Kevin Conroy? Because I believe when you get on board, he was not there, but he was part of this Batman. He was a great Batman and an even greater Bruce Wayne.
yeah, no, well, one of the things that at the recordings that Kevin Conroy would ask, like especially when Talia showed up or when he's alone with when he's Bruce Wayne and he's alone with Alfred or Dick Grayson or Talia, you know, even though he's Bruce Wayne, he goes into that Batman voice. And Kevin Conroy would always add, and that was something that he did. He went and he would go and say, okay, so this is me being me, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he'd do Batman, that low voice, you know, because that's his natural voice. Batman's voice, the Bruce Wayne voice is a put on. The higher voice, that's him being the playboy, you know, and that's a put on. That's not who he is. Although there's a lot of girls complaining about him, you know, like in Mask of the Phantasm, Veronica Vreeland throws a drink in his face, you know. So Bruce Wayne gets it on with women, you know. He is a playboy, but and you know, but for instance, when Talia shows up, he's very serious. Like, you know, she loves him, he does love her, you know. So when he talks to Talia, when like in Avatar, for instance, when they're alone together, it's like he's talking in the Batman voice. And that's something Kevin Conroy came up with as an actor. And by the way, when I first met Kevin Conroy, he was doing On Leather Wings, you know, and I went to the recording and I walk in the door and there's this guy. I'm 6 foot. He tops me, broad shoulders, lantern jaw, you know, hey, how's it going? You know, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy, why isn't he Batman? I mean, you know, Michael Keaton's a good actor, especially in the Spider-Man movies, you know, the Spider when he plays Vulture, he's so good. He's a good actor, but he's a little guy, you know?
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
just
yeah.
Kevin Conroy, you could cowl on him in the cape and it would just look natural, you know?
How was the dynamic working with Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, Eric Radomski? You've mentioned.
Yeah. Well, for me, um, just because he had, I mean, people find it hard to believe, but you know, it was a TV series and it was done on a schedule,
Mm.
and you had to hit the schedule. You know, it was enough time, but you know, you really couldn't do any screw ups. So when I had questions, like if I had a script, well, the wonderful thing about Paul Dini, who I'm doing a graphic novel with Paul right now. That's my job right now is doing a graphic novel for
Oh,
DC that Paul's written the script for, and it's great.
Well,
I can't say much more about it right now. I have to let DC do the announcements and stuff, but I can say that I'm working with them.
okay.
But the way I would work is when I had an art director's question, like when I had a specifically backgrounds or painting or those kinds of questions or discussions, I would always go to Eric and let Eric handle that. If it was a script, it's like a script. The thing about scripts is like Alan Burnett, Paul Dini especially, would just come into my office and go and say, he'd just pitch ideas. He'd say, I got an idea. You remember, Cesar Romero in the 60s? He always had a girl. He always had a moll in the gang. Yeah, yeah, I think he needs a girlfriend. And he'd leave, and then Harley Quinn shows up in the script. Things like that would happen all the time. And if I had any story ideas or, like storyboarding or, character design, I would always go to Bruce. So I kind of that helped my dyslexic brain too. I could like know where to go. And that's just how I did it. In layouts and stuff, I would always go to Bruce, because Bruce would be the drawing. And a lot of the times I just go like, look at this thing. What's wrong with it? He's like, I'll tell you what's wrong with it. And he'd like, there, see? I'm like, that's what I wanted.
well, you were, as we have said, you were one of the greatest name of the first season of the Batman animated series, but
Oh,
you weren't there for season two and the new Batman Adventures and Superman. What happened
yeah.
there? Why did you leave?
Oh, I wanted a raise. I was there with no, I wanted a raise. And at that time, I was talking, Gary Kreisel over at Disney would constantly be calling me up because they were doing gargoyles, in
Oh,
development, and they wanted me to do gargoyles.
thank you
And
for that.
yeah, but all I did was I get a lot of credit for gargoyles. I didn't work on it. Frank Parr was let go, and I said, Frank Parr, he's got connections. It's like he's very good. It's like talk to Frank, and they did, and they hired him. And they took Michael Reeves, away from Batman. But I was working on, I think when they were trying to get me to leave, I was working on Harlequinade. And so I was really into the shows I was working on. And I was getting phone calls from Jeffrey Katzenberg and, to leave. And I didn't really want to leave because, and then Deep Freeze, you know, there's so much of me in that, with Nora Freeze. And there's just, I'm actually crying when I'm storyboarding the ending, of
Oh,
Deep Freeze in the iceberg. It's like I'm crying because it's like I'm putting everything I have into it.
Mm.
Well, that was really hard to leave. But after that, I worked on the pilot for Freakazoid and I was doing development for Superman, which changed. They didn't go to Superman right away, So I was working on Freakazoid and so we're in between stuff. And then I actually made a deal with Jim Lee and Wildstorm to do Gen 13, the feature. And I was like a direct-to-video feature, which no one had done that. And it was PG-13, with violence and semi-nudity and things like that. And, so I could do that and more money, a lot more money. And I could pick, and I got an office a block from the beach, 15 minutes from my house. And it was like there was an office space that I was able to get for a reasonable price because back then, after the earthquake, 92 earthquake, or was it 92, 93 earthquake, uh, people, Santa Monica was a ghost town. Main Street in Santa Monica was a ghost town. But that's my, that's where I surfed. That's, I'm homeboy for Santa Monica in Venice. That's where I surfed all the time. So I got an office a block from where I surfed, from my break. And I was like, well, okay, this gets me to leave Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers, Tim Sarnoff didn't even believe I was leaving. They thought I was faking. So the day before I have to go, and start Gen 13, he's in here and says, so what can I do to make you stay? I, I can't, you know, they're already spending money. It's like the place is rented. Had to buy furniture, it's like yeah, I have to do this thing.
Mhm.
So for the next couple of years, I did Gen 13, which was very low budget, but it was the first of its kind. It was the first direct to video. And it didn't get, and it was supposed to get a release, but Disney ended up getting the distribution rights for the United States. But Paramount got the distribution rights for the world. So it's everywhere. I still get royalty checks from the Directors Guild because it shows up in the Netherlands. I think Spain. I think it was released in Spain, direct to video. Right now we're talking years ago, but and definitely all over the United Kingdom, Netherlands. I still get like royalties from those places. I guess it plays on TV. And
Mhm.
now everyone's doing really violent direct to video cartoons, and it's like, but that Gen 13 was the first.
Yeah.
It's not.
Um, my sense is your series is something like a legacy, and have a lot of influence here. That in fact here there is a funny version from your series for the opening of your series that is
Mhm.
called. I invite you to looking for it. It's called Calico Electrónico. Look for it, or after the interview, can we send you a little link to check this
Yeah.
thoroughly?
What's it
Uh,
called?
Calico Electrónico.
Calico Electronica. Okay.
Yeah, we can send you.
Yeah.
But the point is, do you feel this legacy in another movies, in another series, or for example, we are waiting for an adaptation for Mike Flanagan's to Clayface, and maybe have something for your chapter. Do you feel that? Do you show your legacy in the new creations?
Well, I didn't really think about it very much because in any of the documentaries that Warner Brothers, they would actually play down my involvement, so there wasn't much said or anything. But lately, like I've been going to, when I go to conventions, I was actually surprised that people knew me by my face.
Hmm.
And I'm like, what?
Mhm.
And I have like these young guys and girls coming up to me, like young, like teenagers going like, "You're my favorite director." And I'm like, "How can I be your favorite director?" But then I realized that, oh no, it's on HBO Max, and none of the other Batman iterations are on there. None of the, when if people ask me when I was gone from Warner Brothers, I came back and I did Scooby-Doo's, and I love doing Scooby-Doo, and I worked for Dan Reba on Justice League a little bit, just doing storyboards. So I wasn't gone from Warner Brothers. But when you see the Joker with like blank lips and, the black eyes, it's like, what the hell are you doing? You know,
Yeah, yeah.
when you see that change and all the characters and all of a sudden everyone's got a big head and it's just weird looking. Yeah, I was gone. When they did the character change.
But
Um,
you came back for Harley Quinn in the new series.
yes, but that's like Scooby-Doo. I met Jennifer Coyle. She was the first director to do Scooby-Doo, and I was on Pirates Ahoy, and had I was working for Joe Horn, and I did like the opening sequences in Pirates Ahoy, and I did the introduction. I actually had Daphne put her feet up on the dashboard and doing her toenails, things like that. And it was all blue pencil, just roughs. I thought I was doing roughs, and I handed in my roughs, and they said, "Well, you're done." And I'm like, "What?" Yeah, no, they love it. Don't touch it. Leave it alone. Any changes, we'll do it, and I had like a month left. And so they said, Jennifer Coyle, she's first time director. She's got the romp in her section. And the romp is like a series of jokes, like Warner Brothers style jokes that that you have to do. It's a lot of work for for just a few minutes, but it's all the jokes and stuff that you have to come up with. So I said, sure. I volunteered. I met Jennifer and I said, I volunteer, like I'll do it. And she was a big fan of Batman. So she was like, thank you, and we've been friends ever since. And every time, we worked on Spectacular Spider-Man together. And so when she got the Harley Quinn show, you know, I'm not going to take big credit for working on Harley Quinn because all I did was Jennifer just went and said, look, here are the problem stuff. And I would just freelance fix the storyboards. That's all I'm doing. Coming up with routines, again, kind of like Scooby-Doo, but I was coming up with gag routines and stuff. And, I did fixes on, the character, like in I did a lot of work on the Valentine's Day special. If you've seen that one where Bane grows
Yeah.
giant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they were pixelating his junk. And and uh, and Jennifer's like, that's not funny. So we got to make it funny. You know, the banner that's, the Gotham Sausage Festival, things, those jokes, flock of pigeons suddenly flies up and blocks what needs to be blocked. So, it, you know, that's the kind of work I was doing on Harley Quinn.
Well, before we have to end the interview, I really have to ask you about the Stripperella, the series you did from a Stanley creation.
Yeah.
Not most people knows it, but I think it's something very funny.
Yeah, no, no. I thought Stripperella, it came out good. It was a kind of like I was going through a divorce at that time, after 18 years, one person, it's like I was going through a divorce and that this job showed up, the agents like hooked me up with and that was done at Nickelodeon of all places. And and met Stan Lee and I I was stone cold sober while I was there. And I had never gone to strip clubs. Just I had no interest in going to strip clubs. I mean, a lot of guys in the business, hey, let's go to a strip club. And I'm like, you go to a strip club. He's like, why? I don't want you watching me with a girl, okay? It's like I don't want to have a girl on my lap and you sitting there leering at me, okay? That's not our relationship, with any guy. I'm not interested. So that and and the thing is like Pam Anderson was a sweetheart. And the main thing that I found is like I could please her with the storyboards and stuff. And the schedule was terrible on that one, and the budget was nothing. It was just the bare minimum. The budgets at Deke were bigger, believe it or not. But and we're talking the 80s. But the material was funny, and the crew that I assembled could get it done, and we knew it. It's like, I mean, Stan Lee actually got mad at me at one point, which is why I didn't do the next season, which was terrible. They just did a terrible job on the second season. But the first season, um, one thing that there was so little time that when the character designs, like by Jill Thompson, and and I got like artists that I really admired to do it, and Brad Coombs, who I worked with on the Pearl Jam video. Um, he did character designs on that. So the character designs would come in and I'd go, if Pam approves them, they're going because the show is leaving. It's like we are behind schedule and we are going to catch up. So that was my responsibility, was getting the show on the air. Had to put up with a lot of politics, you know,
I
on that
understand.
one. It was like between Stan Lee, but the saving grace was Pam Anderson. We had a great crew. Basically, it's like Maurice LaMarche, you know, the brain, pinking the brain, you know, just the voice actors, Tom Kenny, Jill Talley, just the voice actors that we got. If you got those voice actors, like if you got Maurice LaMarche and Tom Kenny and Jill Talley, you're covered. You've got everyone you need. You need Woody Allen, you got it. It's like you need like Orson Welles, you got it. You need Robert Stack, you got it. And Pam Anderson, which everyone kind of was the executives were kind of poo-pooing her like at the beginning, like, oh, and I'm going like, number one, we gotta cure that attitude because number one, Pam Anderson is the boss. Remember that. We gotta listen to her. And number two, Tool Time. She's got comedy chops. It's like she knows what she's doing. And she has a beautiful voice. I think right now she's doing Chicago on Broadway,
Wow.
Playing Roxy, which is the main character. It's like it's like she's still got it. But that was the best part of that was, Pam Anderson.
Well,
But the fact that I got a hug and a kiss from her in front of the executives probably didn't help me. But I'm a surfer, I'm a surfer. It's like she's with, it's like I think she was dating, well, she was doing Kid Rock at the time, that didn't last, but thank God.
Well, and just to put an end of this really great interview, it's been a real pleasure for us. Do you think there is any possibility for you to return to a Batman series anyway?
Well, right now it's like I've been doing Batman comics with Alan Burnett and Paul Dini, and yeah, I don't think I'll ever not do Batman. Will I be doing Batman at Warner Brothers? That all depends on Warner Brothers, really, and who's in charge, and who knows what's going on at Warner Brothers right now, because there's changes going on. And people are complaining and saying, "Oh my God, what's going to happen at Warner Brothers?" And I'm like, well, I haven't been impressed, other than the Harley Quinn show. I haven't been very impressed with what they've done. Like, I didn't like Cape Crusader at all, and overly designed, just very strange for no good reason. And I would love to do like well, you guys have seen the kind of Batman I do. I would love to do that. And I would love to get back to that level of animation. And everyone complains about AI and they complain about all these different things, like CG and all that. But if anyone looks at, say, Rat Bastard, which was a pilot I did for Ed Neumeyer and Imagine Television, Ed Neumeyer did RoboCop. And I did it with Cliff Galbraith. His property was Rat Bastard. That was all, it's 2D. It's done, it looks like traditional animation, but it's all CG, So, and CG actually made the 2D process much faster and more fun. So, the new AI and these are all new tools. So you can do 2D animation and do it beautifully. So I'm not going to rule it out at all. I would love to do it,
Let's hope
but
so.
Good fingers.
yeah, it'd be
Well,
great.
as I said, it's been a real pleasure, an honor. We wish you the best of lucks, and
Thank
we
you.
hope we can repeat this in the future.
Yeah, we hope to see you.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.